Welcome back. You are watching the Oasis Focus on Finance show, and we're talking about taxes and economy. Our special guests in studio are Fahad Shaikh and Isma-el Ebrahim, senior investment analysts at Oasis. Fahad, your turn now. Are we getting value as a society for our tax money?
Shafiq, I think that's a very important question, especially because a lot of people might argue that we're not. But I think it's important for us to step back, go back to 10 or 20 years ago to see the quality of life that was being delivered to South Africans back then, and then compare it to where we are today. If you look at it across a lot of different metrics, if you look at it in terms of how the life expectancy of South Africans have improved, I mean, if you just go back to, I think, 2005 or 2000, it's increased from 52 years to 57 years. Even if you look at something like electricity, if you go back to 2000, only 66% of our population had access to electricity. If you compare it to now, more than 80% of your households have gotten access to electricity. Similarly, if you look at the percentage of population that's living below the poverty line, that's also substantially reduced over this time period. So I think it's important to put it into context of how your quality of life has improved over the long term. And I think we've seen significant improvements there. Then also, if you look around you, if you look at in Cape Town, if you look at all the new infrastructure that have come up, the new roads, the new bridges, if you go down to Sea Point, you always see new public areas being developed there. So all of that is coming through the taxes that you've paid, and which is now being spent back towards societies, improving the quality of life for the general population. So you do see those benefits coming through. Then I earlier highlighted the social grant system. 20% of South Africa's population survives primarily on social grants. That's their key source of income. And again, 80% of the population or households receive some sort of social grant from the government. So I think it goes a long way in promoting social stability and reducing inequality. I think some of the studies that some of the international organizations have done actually show that it's because of South Africa's tax system that your Gini coefficient actually reduces from around 0.77 to 0.6 odd, just because of the progressive taxation system that we do have, which has helped reducing inequality. So I think while individuals will always have issues in terms of service delivery from governments, I think we need to take a longer term view and actually see that a lot has improved over the last 1 or 2 decades.
Isma-el, I'm going to give you a Zingara moment. You've got a crystal ball. What does South Africa's tax outlook look like?
Shafiq, just to contextualize again, I think South Africa is by no means isolated in terms of what is happening globally. So if we look at it, there has been a concerted effort over the last 2 budget speeches or last 2 years by National Treasury, by the Minister of Finance, to close that gap between revenue and expenditure. And that can include, cutting back on wasteful expenditure, cutting back on any unnecessary items, so reducing expenditure. If we compare, also importantly, our tax income and our revenue, remember our revenue and expenses is very important from the way global rating agencies see us. Because if they, let's say at the moment we are still investment grade, if they downgrade, we'll be sub-investment grade, and it will have wider implications for the funding costs for the broader economy, for businesses, for individuals. But at the moment, alhamdulillah, we're safe. And that's because global rating agencies have acknowledged the efforts by the government to cut back on wasteful expenditure, for example, and to close that budget gap between revenue and expenditure, or the budget deficit. However, if we look at countries like Brazil, for example, they haven't been as fortunate because they've actually failed to meet their budget targets, they've failed to cut back on expenditure, for example, and they've subsequently been downgraded to sub-investment grade, and that's obviously had wider implications. So from a tax perspective, the outlook for South Africa, we can expect government to continue that theme of fiscal consolidation, reducing that expenditure gap. Importantly, bearing in mind that our biggest trading partner at the moment is going through a sort of an economic transition, China. So in that regard, that would place us in a lower, or China's going through a lower growth trajectory, and that has slightly impacted our growth. So while we have had lower growth, growth has been subdued, but it's still been stable, which has been important. However, considering that stable or subdued growth trajectory, we will see potentially the government looking for more creative ways to raise taxes. Fahad talked about things like sin taxes, for example, or levied on alcohol and tobacco, etc. But more recently, we've seen the Davis Tax Committee being commissioned, and they've now come out with their findings. And we see that there is an ongoing discussion on issues like potentially increasing the VAT rate. I indicated that our VAT rate is very low compared to global standards. So even an increase, I don't expect it to, take us much higher than where some of our peer countries are. So they are looking at things like, for example, VAT, but also corporate taxes in the mining sector, for example. So overall, there will be more creative ways in which these budget deficits are addressed. Importantly, there are still levers to sort of reduce, costs. I think from a revenue perspective, it's also very good for us to look at ourselves. How efficiently can we do things for the greater good of our society, for the greater good of our country? So how efficiently can we do it? Are we being more efficient in the way we're using our money? Importantly, for an individual, savings and diversifying your income streams, protecting and growing your wealth will be important. And how we protect and how we grow our wealth is also, we need to consider our savings. And with that, obviously, we need to consider our investment products. And I think we'll go on to explain some of the products that we have to cater for such an environment.
Indeed, Fahad, the literal million rand question: how as an investor can me, myself, I and us protect our wealth given the current tax regime and the current tax outlook?
Shafiq, I think overall consumers and households need to become more proactive about protecting their own wealth and making sure that that wealth grows over the long term. I think going forward, if you look at the, we've spoken about how we might see interest rates rising in the US. And obviously that will have implications even in South Africa, where we might see the repo rate or the interest rate continue to move higher. Now that will have some impact on consumer spending, especially if you've got a mortgage and if you've got a car finance and if your payments go up. Obviously it does impact it does have implications for your income. But I think that I think really highlights the importance for households to make sure they're managing their expenditure accordingly, making sure that they're saving enough that they can offset any of these cost increases going forward. And secondly, ensuring that over the long term, that their wealth or their savings continue to grow a lot faster than what inflation is growing at.
We've also talked about the tax outlook. And while government may be looking for more creative ways to increase their revenue streams, and that might imply increased taxes on an individual or corporate basis, or increased VAT, which might affect you, government have pointed you sort of in the right direction on how to counter this. They've introduced, the tax-free savings accounts, which is sort of hinting, save, and this is giving you an advantage. This is giving you the ability to save within a tax shield and take advantage of, the compounded investment growth within a tax shield. So they've delivered this within the last budget speech. It includes a 30% or 30,000 Rand contribution per year, up to a limit of 500,000 Rand over your lifetime. And then also, to add to that, Oasis, we've got those kind of products that deliver this government initiative of a tax-free savings account. Further to that, we're talking about protecting and growing your real wealth. Oasis, if we look at our track record, we've got, with the Rand having gone up, there is still a risk of inflation, and protecting and growing your real wealth becomes increasingly important. If you look at our track record, we've got a consistent track record over the last 18 years of delivering inflation-beating returns. We've got products that are designed to beat inflation. We've got products that are designed to protect and grow your real wealth, and the track record speaks for itself. To bring to your attention some of the products that we're talking about, we've got progressive balanced funds. Depending on your risk appetite, we've got these balanced funds are an ideal product that are suited to take advantage of the offshore capability, as well as diversifying your income streams through investments in income, property and equity. further to that, we've also, as an investment house, we've also strategically positioned our funds to take advantage of those companies with offshore exposure who will benefit from any rand weakness. So alhamdulillah, while there are, Fahad painted the picture of, there is an outlook of increasing interest rates and it's important to manage and protect your wealth, there's plenty of opportunity to do this. And I don't think as a society we should be concerned. However, we should be aware of what the solutions are.
Gentlemen, thank you. It is, of course, the month of Muharram. Any final comments?
Thank you, Shafiq. We'd like to wish you and all our viewers a happy Muharram.
Thank you, Shafiq. Assalamu alaikum.
And walaikum salam to our special guest, Fahad Shaikh and Isma-el Ebrahim, Senior Investment Analysts at Oasis. You have been watching the Oasis Focus on Finance show, and we were discussing tax and the economy. In the next show, next week, we'll be discussing tax and retirement. Should you want to contact us, you can call 0860 100 786 or email info@oasiscrescent.com. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.